You're live.
All right, welcome to the 5th in our series of monthly webinars for US Halal consultants. I'm pleased to be back with you today after a bit of a break last month. And we have a wonderful couple of speakers for you today. Before I get to introducing them, just a little background again on USHC. We are the only consultants group in the US, as far as we are aware, that deals with companies who are interested in entering, operating, or expanding in the halal space in the United States. We have a group of very experienced halal consultants that are our founding members, and we provide business advice and all kinds of other kinds of advice to companies that want to operate in the halal space. We offer trainings. We are planning a training on the FDA's, the Food and Drug Administration's Foreign Supplier Verification Program. And we will be helping anybody who is interested in talking with us about the US halal market. Halal is less about religion and more about health and healthy lifestyle. And so while the last series of webinars have addressed different topics, we've addressed regulation in the United States by the USDA, the US Department of Agriculture, and the Federal Food and Drug Administration. We've talked about how to start a halal business. We've had a webinar on certification and verification of halal products and international halal business. And also our last month's one was about a very important topic, raising capital for a halal business. This month, we are going to be addressing tourism. And for that reason, I'm not dressed in my usual boring black suit. I'm wearing a nice cardigan in bright orange color because we have two wonderful people who are working in that space. And I'm going to introduce them momentarily. Before I do that, though, I want to mention now that we are also gearing up for this year's 4th annual Halal Expo and Summit, which will happen on October the 20th and 21st. And this year's is not to be missed. We're partnering with a number of really great new partners, trade arms of foreign governments that are very, very active in the halal space, trade associations, and others to bring you a different kind of expo that will be both hands-on and virtual this year. And we're looking forward to including cooking shows as well. So without further ado, I will turn to the first of our speakers. She is Dr. Attiya Ahmad, no relation to our founder, Marwan. And she is an associate professor of anthropology and international affairs at George Washington University, one of the schools I went to in my early undergraduate years. Broadly conceived, Attiya's research focuses on the interrelation between contemporary Islamic reform movements and political economic processes from a gendered perspective. But she has been working lately on a multi-year ethnographically focused research project on the development of halal tourism networks in the Mediterranean and the Middle East. And her research has recently taken her back to Spain. She has also conducted research throughout the Muslim world, most notably in the Arab Gulf states and the Persian Gulf region, South Asia, and Turkey. She's the author of a multi-award winning book, Everyday Conversions, Islam, Domestic Work, and South Asian Migrant Women in Kuwait. And she's had fellowships with numerous grants, including at Oxford, the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, Stanford University. She received the Religion, Journalism, and International Affairs Award, and she's been with the National Science Foundation. So, Dr. Attiya Ahmad, take it away.
Hello, peace, salam. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So first, thank you to the organizers for the invitation to participate in this forum and for drawing much needed attention to the issue of halal tourism, especially now in the wake of the pandemic. I also want to clarify my comments today will focus largely on the circumstances of halal tourism pre-pandemic, maybe on a hopeful note that maybe we can reach back to the sort of dynamism and vibrancy we saw before the pandemic. And then I am happy, especially in the context of the Q&A session, to discuss some preliminary findings, some preliminary thoughts about the effects of the pandemic. Briefly stated, I can say that the pandemic has decimated international tourism, and as part of that halal tourism, I'm currently in Spain resuming my research after having to put it on pause for a year and a half, or at least on the ground field research on pause for a year and a half due to the pandemic. And at this point, it's too early to tell what are the long-term effects potentially of the pandemic and how different actors involved in the sector, how they have adapted or not to the circumstances. Okay, so let me, before we begin my prepared comments, let me also briefly clarify my position and role. So as Elisabeth mentioned in her very generous and kind introduction, I'm a sociocultural anthropologist. I'm a professor of anthropology in international affairs at George Washington University. So I am not part of a certification board, a halal company, or a purveyor involved in halal tourism or tourism more generally. Rather, I've been conducting research on the development of halal tourism, a term I first learned about and was curious about beginning in 2012. Over the last several years, so before being halted by the pandemic, I have been conducting fieldwork, ethnographic fieldwork, to learn about the work of purveyors of halal tourism, so tour companies, tour guides, hotels, restaurants, halal certification boards, and tourism industry officials, as well as consumers of halal tourism, those who are part of group tours and those who go as independent travelers, and also research of key places where halal tourism is developing, including southern Spain, Andalusia, and in Turkey. My focus has been to document these groups' utterances and practices of what they refer to and what they call halal tourism. As an anthropologist, my focus is not on determining the definition of halal tourism or who among these groups has an understanding or definition that is the most accurate or correct, but to trace how these different groups understand and undertake activities related to this term. So my job here is not to advise you whether you should get involved in halal tourism or not, right, as either as purveyors or consumers. So my job isn't to persuade you either way, but to share with you some of my findings from my ongoing research. So let me provide some political, economic, and historical context. Let me provide you some background. Now, tourism is a surprisingly significant global phenomenon. According to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, before the global pandemic, tourism accounted for over 10% of global GDP, 1 out of every 10 jobs worldwide, and it constitutes the most extensive circulation of goods, services, information, and populations in our contemporary world. Tourism is also important to nation building and state-making processes, for example, to economic development of states, of self-power, and of infrastructural development, for example, the building and the maintenance of ports, airports, and roads. On the less positive side, tourism is also a significant factor in gentrification, home and land dispossession, environmental degradation and destruction, and economic dependency. It's also significant to processes of exotification, where places appeal to international tourism is often predicated on its perceived characteristics, what one might consider stereotypes or other savvy marketing, right, that tourism then reinscribes. Tourism is also a site and means through which imperial and neo-colonial relations are produced. Here we need to ask ourselves, who are the tourists and where are they from? Who and what are the places are being toured? And what are the interrelations between these groups and these places? Now, while travel has a longer historical trajectory, mass consumer-driven tourism itself developed in the late 19th century at the height of imperial and colonial projects globally. Religion was part of the process of the development of the tourism sector. Key actors, including Thomas Cook, who founded what became the largest and longest running travel company, Thomas Cook and Sons, until it folded just under 2 years ago and has subsequently been bought by a company with investors from China, were part of and motivated by promoting Christian fellowship and practice. Parts of the Middle East became among the most popular tourism destination sites, including Egypt and the Holy Land, and parts of the Shem. And here, Judeo-Christian religious histories and imaginaries were emphasized. Now, over the last 10 plus years, the term halal tourism has developed and refers to growing populations of Muslim tourists who are traveling, who often seek services and amenities that have not been previously widely available, and who may have practices of travel that are different from the mainstream, and who bring with them different imaginaries and historical sensibilities to bear upon their travel. So let me briefly unpack this statement. Before the pandemic upended the global travel industry, Muslims, primarily middle class from Southeast Asia, so including Singapore and Malaysia, the Middle East, in particular from the Khalij or the Gulf region, and from North Africa and Europe, constituted the, or depending on one's calculations and methods, among the top two with Chinese nationals, fastest growing population of international tourists today. In terms of sheer numbers, Muslim tourists are estimated to number between, and again, this is pre-pandemic numbers, 140 million in 2017, and they were said to account for about 10% of tourists worldwide. And this was also considered a sector that was developing at twice the rate of international tourism, of the international tourism market as a whole. Now, Muslim tourist expenditures were forecasted to grow from 175 billion US dollars to over 250 billion US dollars over the last few years. Again, this has been upended by the pandemic. Now, many industry insiders projected at the time that Muslims would remain, and potentially might still remain, the fastest growing worldwide population of tourists, both in terms of sheer numbers and in terms of their expenditures. Now, in a global context characterized by the refugee crisis, various attempts at instituting Muslim bans, the global war on terror and systems of surveillance, mobility restrictions, and extrajudicial or exceptional forms of incarceration and imprisonment that have developed in its wake, and where in addition to refugees, Muslims are often associated with migration. It's important to note that Muslim tourists constituted the largest cross-border movement of Muslims both in our contemporary world and historically. So all of that, and let me come down to maybe a more specific question, and what is halal tourism? Now, a loose and amorphous term, so a flexible term, halal tourism refers to an emergent sector of Islamic enterprise that seeks to channel the travel of these Muslim tourists. Those who use the term invariably have concerns. So there's always debate about the use of the term, most notably at tourism trade conferences. And it has even spurred, so these debates and these discussions has spurred one key actor to write an industry paper about this. And here I refer to the work of our colleague at Halal Trip and Crescent writing. Now I've suggested alternative terms, for example, Muslim-friendly travel, and others point out that it's not a great alternative because it's a mouthful and it's hard to market that term. Others have argued for Muslim travel or Islamic travel, and others have dissented to that, and it's been rejected, saying that that the terms imply that there's an intrinsically religious quality to this travel that does not quite capture their aims or intentions. And that it might also be a term that could incite Islamophobic responses and that could potentially halt the development of the sector. So bearing all of these qualifications and reservations in mind, halal tourism is still the term most often used by actors who are involved in this sector, right? And they make different uses of it. So at its most narrow, halal tourism refers to travel and leisure facilities that cater to the needs of observant Muslims. For example, hotels that do not serve alcohol or food items that are deemed haram and subject to religious interdiction, or seaside resorts that have private beaches and swimming pools and spa facilities for women and families. More broadly, however, halal tourism indexes the religio-economic aspirations of several spatially distinct groups, This includes business people and companies operating globally, for example, in Istanbul, in London, in Singapore, in Beijing, and Abu Dhabi, who conceive of their work in purely business terms, right, where they seek to ensure that individual choice, a cornerstone of capitalist and market-driven economies, is one that is available to all consumers, including religiously observant ones seeking to go on travel or on holiday. For investors from the GCC states and entrepreneurs in Singapore and Malaysia, halal tourism is seen as another step in the wake of Islamic finance and banking sectors in their reshaping of economic logics and relations through Islamic precepts and practices. Now, among Muslim community activists in the UK, in the US, in Canada, and in Spain, where I currently am, halal tourism marks their attempt to encourage diasporic Muslims to travel beyond their ancestral homelands and develop a broader appreciation for the plurality of Muslim histories and experiences through travel to different Muslim societies. And recently, entrepreneurs and government officials in a myriad of countries, including but not limited to Japan, South Korea, Australia, Indonesia, and I can go on, have fostered the development of their own national halal tourism infrastructures in the hopes that it'll help them attract growing populations of Muslim tourists, in particular from Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and diasporic Muslims from North America and Europe. In recent years, this globally dispersed network of actors and activity have coalesced through a series of international halal tourism trade conferences, industry sectoral reports, trade magazines, online B2B information portals, and so on and so forth. Collectively, they have sought to carve out recognition of the presence of Muslim tourists and to service their tastes and needs. Their efforts underscore the growing recognition both among practitioners and purveyors, as well as scholars of tourism in the Middle East and the Mediterranean region, that mass consumer-driven travel has developed in ways that assume and privilege Western, Christian, or secular white male as the unmarked category of traveler and tourists. In other words, that tourist facilities have historically developed privileging certain groups. Okay, so let me stop there.
Thank you very much, Attiya. There was so much information packed into that. We're going to have a great discussion after we give Najib a chance to give his perspectives on that. And I have a number of questions myself, and I want to encourage our audience, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We have Marwan Ahmed is going to be monitoring that for us, and he will let us know if there are any wonderful questions. Please do, or comments. We want to hear from you. And now let me introduce our second speaker, my good friend Najib Bensouda, who is a consultant for the hospitality industry. He is a seasoned hotelier, or hotelier, I guess we say in English, with more than 35 years of international experience in management positions, and also as a strategic leader for full-service lifestyle resorts and business hotels. Over his career, he's managed 5-star luxury hotels in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, and has decades of pre-openings and openings, as well as rebrandings of hotels under his belt. Najib has focused on innovative sales and marketing techniques. He's utilized his broad appreciation and understanding of different cultures to do that. And he is a multilingual and avid defender of the environment. Najib is now based in Casablanca, Morocco. So we're very pleased to have you with us, Najib, and please take it away.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth, for a lovely introduction. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I don't know what to say after Dr. Attiya. She said it all.
She did, didn't she?
Yeah, she did say it all. But I will just give you my experiences in this field, because I was fortunate enough to manage a couple of hotels in the Middle East, which were completely halal and which did extremely well. It's an emerging market, as Dr. Attiya has said, and halal tourism is getting very serious attention with a growing number of offerings, facilities as segregated pools, beaches, recreation areas, and halal food. Now, Dr. Attiya, she explained very clearly that halal doesn't mean only food, it's a lifestyle. So even non-Muslims are getting into this because the people who want to have a private, more private vacation with their families, enjoying the security and the pleasure, not having a bar that after the bar in the evening, people get rowdy and noisy and so on. So they enjoy that also. And I like to always mention Shaza hotels because they have been marketing it beautifully. They have halal hotels, but they also have non-Muslim guests. And one of their taglines is, "We are focused on the creation of a 21st century East that respects the past but does not get lost in its nostalgia." So I think
love
that
that.
really, yeah, I think it covers it very well because it's attracting both the Muslims and the non-Muslims. Okay, at this emerging market in the tourism industry, there is some resistance in the halal concept by some non-Muslims. So one has to be very careful in how they market their hotels and not to just concentrate, as Dr. Attiya said, that it's a Muslim thing. Okay, I will. Attiya has mentioned that all the separate pools, the sun areas, the spas, and so on, friendly attractions and services, acceptance of traditional Islamic dress in the destinations, burkina for swimwear. This is in France, it's illegal, it's not allowed, and they're still fighting it in some parts of France. And it's something that we need to work on to be able to explain it properly, that it's not because they think that Muslim girls wearing this are obliged by their families or by their husbands or whatever, which is not true, which is true sometimes and not true at most of the times. Muslims prefer these facilities for religious purposes, and some non-Muslims felt more comfortable and safe in these facilities without having to worry about the security of their families. I was fortunate enough to manage twice in Sharjah, 2 hotels at different moments. And these hotels were doing extremely well. We were running at 85% year-round occupancy with a very high average room rate. Our clients were mostly Muslim families who felt safe and letting their children enjoy the facilities without having to worry about their safety, as I said before, and not giving them much supervision. The husband and wife may be having dinner in a restaurant, and the kids are playing outside or within the compound and feeling very safe because they don't fear the security is quite good, and there are no other people coming in from the bars and so on, as I mentioned before. We also had non-Muslim clients who wanted to peace and a good night's sleep and get up early, have a good breakfast, and head out to the daily activity, feeling fresh and charged. They don't have to listen to all the noises that come in after evening, when people get out of bars. Now, Islam has 2 billion believers spread around the world with a growing presence in several countries such as India, Russia, the USA, and the European continent. Dr. Attiya has mentioned the purchasing power, $2.7 trillion, and this obviously makes an excellent market segment for the hospitality industry. The Muslim travel sector is third in place in the global travel spending. After China, 160 billion, the USA 156 billion, and accounting for about 11% of the total global expenditure on travel. Attiya mentioned that, I think, Dr. Attiya. Is that correct? 11%? Okay, thank you. Muslim travel is one of the fastest growing segments in the world, growing at 4.8% against an industry growing at 3.8%. So this segment is growing very fast, and the potential is fantastic for people who want to do business. So the providers such as hotels, tourist transports, restaurants, travel agencies, tour operators, here is your chance to increase your profits in your business. As you can see, it is a huge market segment that should not be ignored. I mentioned Shaza again because they were smart from the onset to create a halal compliant environment from design to operations. From the whole concept, it's not only in the food and beverage area, but lifestyle, the bedroom, the bathrooms, and everything was designed especially for this kind of market. For other providers who would like to take advantage of this market segment, I would advise them to get some good advice on how to proceed to be halal compliant and to do it before offering it. Because you can't offer it halfways. You have to offer it either completely or don't do it at all. And as the saying goes, it only takes one time to impress. And if you don't impress at the first time, then you lose the business. Thank you. That's all I have to say for now.
Wonderful, Najib. That's an excellent encapsulation of lots of the concepts that Attiya mentioned. So this is really an area that's being consumer driven, and I think it's my, as having worked a little bit in the tourism industry in Morocco, with showing people some of the beautiful features of Morocco, taking them to the desert and seeing the culture and all of that. I think that post-pandemic, we're looking at a potential huge jump in people who are dying to get out. They're dying to travel again. And as the vaccines are rolled out, I just found out this week that New York City, which is where I am right now, has a 70% vaccination rate. The last time I looked at Morocco, they were up to an 11%, and that was a few weeks ago. I think they're probably much higher now because their vaccination program has been very effective. But I think as we're getting through this pandemic, do you think that my impression that people are absolutely dying to get out and about and start re-traveling again? Am I right about that? Where are we going with this?
You're absolutely right. As I mentioned before, when Royal Air Morocco opened its reservations, in one single day, they had 120,000 reservations.
Oh, my goodness.
So they're fully booked up until end of July. Right now, you can't get a ticket. So I think, explosion, it's going to explode. Moroccans have been abroad and got stuck there. The children are crying. They want to come home to see granny and to see aunties and to see uncles and to eat good Moroccan food. And now is the opportunity for them. And the government has made it easier also, because if you show a certificate that you have been vaccinated for both or one, whichever the vaccines are, that you don't have to do a test when you come. So it's governments
Right.
are helping, tourism is helping, hotels are giving excellent rates. Royal Air Morocco, the king himself gave instructions to Royal Air Morocco to lower their rates completely, less than 50%. So you're right, Elisabeth, it's going to explode. It's going to explode everywhere, not only here.
Right. So anything to add, Attiya?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I'm hopeful in relation to the people I've had the great pleasure and honor to work with, that I hope things get better. But unfortunately, I think what I'm seeing is a bit more mixed. I think, as you rightly pointed out, people have felt constrained. People have felt really restricted in terms of their mobility, and so there is perhaps building demand. But whether or not at this point, especially this summer, this year, whether or not they can satisfy those demands is unclear. So as I mentioned, I'm currently in Spain, and I should note that for the most part, my research has focused on smaller scale actors and their networks that they've developed among themselves. And certainly Spain is seeing a mini boom in terms of the number of people that are coming into the country as travelers and tourists. It opened up to inoculated or vaccinated travelers just in the last few weeks. And so there have been more travelers coming into the country. I don't have any figures about that. But in traveling to some of the places where I've conducted longer term field work, I was recently in Cordoba. Unfortunately, I noticed that a lot of smaller companies are not operating right now. Whether or not they are out of business is unclear to me. They may be temporarily closed to keep their operating costs down. But I think there's a hope, but right now it's mixed. There's travel restrictions that are limiting people from being able to travel fully. Some of the tourists that I've focused on often travel in larger groups, and I have not, and I don't expect that. And I think the people here don't expect that to resume at least until next year. But we are seeing smaller groups of tourists, maybe families, couples, individuals traveling. So we're seeing a small, maybe, efflorescence. I don't know if it's a full renaissance quite yet. And one other dynamic that I noticed in my research, again, from the perspective of smaller and medium scale actors, is that they work together as networks. And in connecting together the kind of relationships, the business relationships and working relationships they develop, there's a sort of synergy that developed. And at this point, I think some actors continue to operate, but others are not. And so I don't quite see the same vibrancy yet, but I'm hopeful. Again, the demand perhaps is pent up, and a lot of the key elements, including heritage sites, natural features, including landscapes, remain in place. And a number of people remain very enthusiastic about halal tourism. But how long it'll take and in what form we may see sort of rebuilding, renaissance, reworking efforts, reconfiguration efforts is still unclear.
So how can, in terms of marketing, Attiya, you mentioned, well, both of you mentioned potential issues with marketing a business as halal in terms of potential Islamophobic reactions, and then also perhaps the sort of misinformation people have, especially in the West, about what halal means in the first place. I was actually speaking with a Muslim fairly recently here in the United States, who was skeptical that what I was discussing about halal tourism, this upcoming conference, was actually a thing. But it is a thing, because especially as we're focusing with US halal consultants, halal is a lifestyle. Halal incorporates not only a method of slaughter for food, but also a way of living ethically, of complying with certain ethical standards. And ecotourism is certainly a consideration for that as well. Does your tourism impact the environment? Do you end up destroying the environment because you're engaging in some exploration of a place? So perhaps you can talk about sort of marketing issues and issues that this notion of halal being more broad raises for purposes of companies that want to either enter or operate into the space. Attiya?
Shall I take a stab first? Yes, okay.
Sure.
So I think it can cut two ways. So one, a number of the people that I've been researching with have pointed out that by highlighting, by emphasizing the contributions, right, that Muslims are making and the significance of Muslims in terms of international tourism, that potentially that may also change people's perspectives, their ideas about Islam, and hopefully address some Islamophobic understandings and some stereotypes. So on the one hand, there is that hope. On the other hand, one thing I can say without reservation is the people that I have had the great pleasure of researching with and researching are incredibly savvy marketers, savvy business people who recognize the potential concerns there, and at the same time, many of them are driven not just for rational utilitarian reasons, cost benefit maximizing, but themselves are motivated by ethical, social justice, environmental concerns. And a cornerstone for them, just as you stated, of halal is that it promotes a healthy and sustainable, environmentally conscious, ethically, socially minded form of tourism, especially given pre-pandemic a lot of research and reporting that had emerged about the negative effects of tourism. So, places like in Barcelona and in Amsterdam, where people who reside, citizens of these cities, were being driven out by the incessant demand for Airbnb homes. We're being driven out by higher apartment rates of people seeking to do ecotourism, but in fact having very negative impacts on the environment. And so a number of the people who have gotten involved in tourism under the umbrella of halal tourism themselves are really motivated by these concerns. And one good example is one group that operates and conducts tours in Boston, where part of the tours is ensuring that tourists have the opportunity and the honor of contributing to the very communities that they are traveling in. And so it cuts both ways, right? That it's a different form of tourism that's being promoted, and that seeks to transform our ideas about Muslims and Islam, given globally pervasive Islamophobic ideas and racism, stereotypes, etc. And there's also a push to recognize the already significant contribution and roles that Muslims play in the global marketplace.
Najib, thoughts?
Yes. Marketing for me is educating people. Okay, if you have a beautiful hotel and you don't educate the people or inform them, they will not come to your hotel. The same with halal. Halal needs people to get educated to understand what exactly halal means. Because right now, when you say anybody halal, right in his mind, it's Muslim. Why do I have to do it? I'm not a Muslim. If I'm not a Muslim, am I allowed? I'm not allowed. So education, I think, is the most important factor to inform people what halal really means. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of living. It's a healthy way of living. And as Elisabeth says, we respect the environment. And, people will come to understand it at one stage, and that it's not only dedicated to Muslims. It's for everybody. Everybody is welcome to it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Everyone's welcome to it, and a lot of companies are adopting it. Companies that are not run by Muslims or owned by Muslims, but they're adopting it. Vegan companies, for example, companies that make products like skincare and soap and things like that. They're calling their products halal. Cosmetics halal. Why? Because there's no animal products in it, or no toxins, no poisons, anything like that. They're pure. So it's an interesting phenomenon that I think we are seeing that in the business industries, in other business industries as well. And so to broaden the notion of what it means to be halal to these more environmentally conscious. What's your impact on the world? How do you treat other people? How do you treat your body? What do you put into your body? All of those things, I think, are really part of this concept. And I think even some Muslims can be confused about that. So hopefully we are doing an education function, and I will just again put in a plug for our 4th annual Halal Expo and Summit. In the summit part of it, in this coming October, we will be doing a lot of educational groundwork on what it means to be halal, what the debates are in the halal space in terms of standards and certification and things like that, and how you can understand better how perhaps marketing yourself truthfully, of course, as a halal business is potentially a big business booster for your sector. So any other? Yeah, go ahead, Najib.
I have a little anecdote here, a story which is true.
Yeah, please.
A friend of mine just told me about 2 months ago that she was in Italy, in the middle of Milan, in a very small hotel, not international chain. And they had a lot of Muslim guests. And she was delighted to see that there was a spread of buffet, and there was one section halal foods. And not only were the Muslims going to the halal food, but also the other guests were going and trying the food. So can you imagine in the middle of Milan, Milano, and a small hotel, not even international, and they were practicing halal section,
I can.
Probably.
Very much so. Very
Yeah.
much so. I have
Probably they were concentrating mostly on their food, but that's a step. That's a step, one step forward.
Absolutely. And I have a similar anecdote. I have a German friend who was telling me the other day that every time she comes anywhere near Washington, D.C., in fact, in Tyson's Corner, she stops at the Lebanese Taverna because they have the best food. Well, they don't actually really market themselves as halal, but look at this, the Mediterranean food that they're serving. It's delicious. It's healthy. It's full of olive oil and garlic and all of these things that are good for you. And it's just so tasty, you know, non-Muslims love it as well. So it's one of my favorite cuisines, by the way. Um, additional thoughts, Attiya?
I was thinking I have some anecdotes that are similar, but I think it just sort of recapitulates the point that you were making, that halal products have great appeal, right? Potentially, and one of the things that has been striking as I've conducted research, again, I don't want to reduce a really vibrant, dynamic sector to certain stereotypical actors, but one that I found really striking, and when I've been conducting research and ostensibly not conducting research, taking a break and going to places like Georgia and the Caucasus or going to Hungary, is that I always find halal tourists or Muslim tourists and also halal foods, and inevitably shawarma places are always bustling and busy and make really good business opportunities. And so those often can become focal center points in terms of halal activity. Tour groups go through there, tour guides are aware of it and recommend it, hotels become aware. And so, but yet their appeal is not limited, again, to Muslims or tourists, but have widespread appeal, which both accounts for its global nature, its pervasiveness globally, but also popularity at a local level. And so I think that resonant with what we were both saying is that a lot of the products linked to halal tourism are of great appeal, right? So the mention of Najib in his comments, which were wonderfully rich, pointed out that things like safe environments, family-friendly environments have great appeal, not just to Muslims. And I've seen that repeatedly in my research, that places that I expected maybe certain sorts of or certain types of consumers being there, that has always surprised me, the kind of range of people that are present. And when I ask some of the people I do research, they just say, they want to produce the best product, and that will inevitably attract people. They hope, and it often does. Another anecdote is just when I first came to Granada, I remember many years ago, there was one shop that was selling products that had Andalusi types of motifs. Now I go to Granada and every tourist shop has them, right? So it's indexical of the appeal, and that people really, enjoy, like it, and it has spread a great deal. So.
Right, Andalusi being a factor of when Arabs came to Spain and brought their culture, and which is why we have structures like the Alhambra, and why we have the amazing music that the gypsy version of flamenco, and all of these intercultural, intersectional cultural areas between the two. And speaking of music, one of the areas that has been completely shut down during the pandemic and is only just now coming back in many areas, even New York is still behind in this, is entertainment. And how is there any data, for example, on entertainment in halal spaces during travel or for travel, or what are your thoughts on entertainment going forward?
I think I'll leave that to Dr. Attiya. You did some research on that. I'll leave it up to you, please, if you don't mind.
Okay, so halal entertainment. So I think Najib mentioned that many, especially halal resorts, halal hotels, often offer what is often referred to as family-friendly entertainment. So, for example, shows in some of the the resorts in southern Turkey. Often they'll hire clowns or do calligraphy events, classes, that sort of thing, that have great appeal to a wide range of consumers of different age groups, of different nationalities. I can also say that I wouldn't qualify. So I think the term entertainment we have to be careful about, because some may not necessarily see certain activities as entertainment, but as learning opportunities. But also Ramadan events often feature classes, including cooking classes in some cases, late at night, or calligraphy or events. And some hotels in different parts of the world, so in Malaysia, even in Georgia, actually, I learned this, that they have activities, whether or not one would consider them entertainment activities, that they offer those as well. Another example is, I guess, Muslim-themed events. So whirling dervishes, concerts. I remember a few years ago I was in Cordoba, and there was an Andalusi music ensemble that attracted a huge audience, actually multiple audiences on different days. So all of that to say, actually, it's a great question. I have not specifically thought about the question of learning pedagogical activities that one might consider entertainment. To my knowledge, no one has done research on this, but this is also, I imagine, a growth sector, again, because of the widespread appeal, and how it can function in multiple registers. So sometimes classes can entertain children, keep them occupied, give parents a break. So I think it's a great question, and I think one that warrants investigation and research. But certainly there's a lot of synergy between halal tourism and halal entertainment and activities and learning opportunities and classes. And that they work together, and I think it would be a great area to look more into.
Well, there's an interesting question we've just had to do with Muslim-owned airlines. And why is it that they are Muslim-owned airlines? Why are they serving alcohol instead of marketing themselves as halal? Why don't they adhere to halal by refraining from serving alcohol? Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's a good question. These airlines, they only think of money. They want to make money. If you don't serve alcohol in your planes, you will have less clients, but I guess it will come. I think it will come, and as we say, there are a lot of Muslim travelers around the world, and one of these days, I'm sure it will happen. The plane will be completely halal and offer their services. But right now, I think they're thinking more of making money and trying to get as much money as they can. But I believe very strongly that it will come soon.
Will that depend? Do you think that will depend on consumers demanding that? That's typically one way businesses change, when consumers demand that they change.
It could be, and if they're smart also, if the airlines are smart, they will have, because there's a lot of passengers traveling. Muslim passengers traveling and requesting halal, but they have no choice right now. It's both. It has to go both ways: the demand and also the supply. The people who are smart enough will say, okay, we certain flights will be completely halal, and not probably all the flights, but certain flights, yes.
Right. I was thinking certainly about flights where people are going on Hajj, on the annual pilgrimage. Yeah.
Well, that's absolutely no alcohol on that.
Yeah.
For those flights going to Mecca and so on. Yeah.
Oh, is that already true?
Yeah, that's already
okay.
There. Yeah.
Okay, so the airlines already have an awareness then. They just need to be sort of jump started. Yeah.
This is the problem. When I moderated the last thing a couple of hours ago, we talked about the same thing. When you are in your comfort zone and making a lot of money, you don't try to be creative and to be to do something different. You're afraid that if you do it,
Right.
you will lose clients and this. This is the problem. We always have to be creative and create a demand. We have to create the demand. That's why I was saying that not only will do the guests or do the clients have to ask for it, we have to create it and give it to them. When you create demand, you always get good results.
Right. I think that also you have sometimes when you ask for a halal meal on an airline, you end up getting a vegetarian meal instead. So perhaps that's an area where consumers need to be more vocal in demanding halal upfront before they even book that ticket, and let the airline know that they need not just vegetarian but halal, because it's not just the fact that meat was killed a particular way. It's the whole healthy lifestyle thing that we've been talking about. Yeah. So I'm really excited about this, that tourism really is, I hope, going to be coming back. If not very, very soon, it's definitely on the up and up, especially with the developments that the Moroccan government is making with requiring Royal Air Morocco to lower its prices and boost tourism. But also things are opening up as well in terms of the Airbnbs and hotels and things and small riads and things in Morocco that I know are now just beginning to get back into, getting themselves ready to reopen and put that investment in that they've been closed for so long. So I think we're in very positive territory here. So we have to work on it in our own country too, right? America. So we're kind of getting close to the end. Do either of you have some final thoughts you want to share with our audience about anything to do with halal tourism, or advice for companies that are not in the space and want to get into the space, advice for companies that already operate in the space? What can we do to really even boost this some more?
I think Attiya had a very good point regarding entertainment in this business. Here in the south of Morocco, in Agadir, I managed a hotel there once before and in Marrakesh. And what we did was we, like you said, face painting for the kids, teaching them how to, cook, getting cooking lessons, how to make a good Moroccan tea, because the Moroccan tea is very famous worldwide, and everybody wants to learn how to make a good cup of tea. So there are ways to do entertainment without going
Henna,
overboard.
yeah. And don't
I
forget
think
henna, that's so popular.
henna, exactly, henna. And, the kids loved it, and they were very happy learning how to drink the tea and make the tea and learning face painting and blowing balloons here and there. There are a lot of things to attract kids, and kids attract their parents to come to places like that. They insist on their parents to come like that. Yeah, I think, and also I want to insist on people who haven't started yet to get educated on this, on halal. Get fully educated, know exactly before they start what they have to offer and what is not allowed and what is allowed, so that when they open, they don't have any surprises. And people who've started already, I'm sure they're doing extremely well. And just think about entertainment, think about other things also, and include them. I think Attiya would do, Dr. Attiya would do a research on entertainment now in the halal, right?
Yes, I think we've sown the seed.
Yeah.
That's
It
beautiful.
would be delightful to do that. And so can I take it briefly from there? So I actually just wanted to sort of underscore something that Najib said earlier and just mentioned now. I would really emphasize the need to educate oneself, and there's happily lots of opportunities available. So not just through US Halal Consultancy, but also now there are at least several worldwide halal summit events, congresses, where there's lot to be learned. Over the past year, many of these have gone to online platforms. So I would really encourage people to learn as much as they can. It'll still take me a few years before my articles and books are out, but hopefully I can also be part of that process and share with people my research findings. And I think also education will also help us recognize that, again, Muslims are playing, and halal is not exclusively, again, just for Muslims, but is becoming an avenue through which people can recognize the contributions that Muslims around the world are playing in terms of the global economy, and also that it becomes a means in and through which we can think about, rethink existing paradigms that may have very negative effects, ethical effects, environmental effects. And so think of halal as transformative, right? So halal tourism is transformative of tourism, not just a particular segment or dimension of tourism catering to a particular group, but one that can hopefully improve tourism for people, in terms of their personal growth and learning, but also for the planet in terms of, I don't want to sound all kumbaya, but, in terms of positive environmental effects, in terms of better learning about peoples and places in seemingly distant areas of the world that people often assume disconnected from them. So perhaps it's no surprise. And again, underscoring what Najib says, and as an educator, I would say, please educate oneself.
Excellent. I totally agree with both of you. And I'm pleased to say that both of you are, of course, invited back for this year's Halal Expo and Summit. I look forward to having you both on the panels, on the panel that we're undoubtedly going to have on halal tourism. And in the meantime, though, folks, you can join us, US Halal Consultants, for additional monthly webinars. We will be focusing in upcoming webinars on not only our Halal Expo and Summit in October, which will perform a big education function. Please contact us ahead of time if you have questions that you want to have addressed. We will also be partnering, as I said, with some other wonderful countries that are involved in halal, like Malaysia and Turkey, and working with them on other halal expos, including food. And for our own Expo and Summit this year, last year was only virtual. We had a cooking show that was done virtually, but this year we are planning a bunch of cooking shows that will be in person, in the flesh. You'll be able to smell and taste. So don't miss that. And also stay tuned for our upcoming announcement on FDA training in the foreign supplier verification program. Very important for anybody involved in any kind of importing food products into the United States. And I think with that, we are right up at our time limit. Please join us again next month and stay tuned to this space.
I would like to say one thing to Attiya. Dr. Attiya,
oh, please,
can you send me your latest research on, please? I don't know if I have your email address.
Okay, I would be delighted. We'll yes.